What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. Fight day. Uh, Everyone's excited. I'm excited. Going to give my last minute thoughts on the fight, but I almost didn't want to make this video. I really didn't. And the reason why I am making this video, big reason why, is because of Sean Zatel's question yesterday to Dana White. And this is not a shot at Sean Zatel. I don't know Sean Zatel personally. I know him casually. I was at the Boxing Voice the same time he was at the Boxing Voice. I didn't interact with him directly a lot. May have been on the phone in a three-way conversation one time with him and Ness, but Ness was pretty much doing the talking. It wasn't like him and I were having a conversation. I I like Jean Zattel from what I've known of him. Again, we're not. I don't have any personal relationship with him. I'm not gonna act like I do, but I do know him. I know his work. I respect him. I respect his work. One of the hardest working journalists I've ever seen because I saw what he did at the Boxing Voice. Anywhere Ness wanted to send him, he accepted the task and he was always up to the challenge. And his work was high quality and it still is high quality. Now, whether we disagree on certain things doesn't mean that there's any animosity towards him, but we do have some disagreements, and I have a lot of disagreements with people in regards to the Muhammad Ali Act, in regards to this whole situation with TKO, right? And I just want to clarify a lot of the things that are being said. And this is not me opposing the Muhammad Ali Act. This is not me insulting the Muhammad Ali Act, denigrating it, but I'm just going to speak facts here because everyone is talking about this act. All of a sudden, now, it's being used so conveniently now when it was brought up a decade ago. It was kind of swept under the rug because who it was being used against, a lot of people liked and supported and were on that person's side. So to me, this is not about the act. In my opinion, I just think this is about tribalism, as many things in the sport of boxing are. And this is just another example of that. And I'm not even really accusing Sean Zatella that. Maybe subconsciously there is tribalism in regards to him, but I'm not going to accuse him of that because, like I said, I respect him. He does great work. I saw the work he did at the Boxing Voice when I was over there. A lot of the material that he would send, the video interviews, writers would transcribe those video interviews into articles, and I would edit a lot of those articles, and I would transcribe a lot of his video interviews into articles myself. And he's does great work. There's no doubt about it. So again, I have to keep reiterating: this is not a shot against him. It's not me insulting him in any way, but we just have a disagreement on this. So let's talk about this Muhammad Ali Act because again, it's being passed off here as the Holy Grail. But let's just look at the facts here, right? And it's funny too because I remember the same people, like Lou DiBella, used to always criticize the Muhammad Ali Act, saying it was toothless, it was never really enforced, and it was just a piece of legislation that wasn't highly effective. But all of a sudden, he's concerned about it. So for some reason now he thinks because it's against possibly somebody that he doesn't like, that all of a sudden it's become more important now than it's ever been, at least in his eyes, the way he talked about it in the past. So let's just take a look at it, right? So, in practical terms, the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act has never really been enforced in the sense of a court issuing a judgment explicitly applying the law to penalize a promoter or grant a fighter relief. The act is mostly a regulatory tool. It sets rules for transparency, disclosure, and conflicts of interest. There is no federal agency that actively enforces it. Enforcement happens only if a fighter or another party sues in court. Most cases end in settlements or dismissals. Fighters and promoters often cite the Ali Act to gain leverage for disputes, right? So the act is mostly a regulatory tool. It sets rules for transparency, disclosure, and conflicts of interest. There is no federal agency that actively enforces it. Enforcement happens only if a fighter. Okay, I already read this. I'm sorry. I apologize. Let's go to this part here. It says most cases end in settlements or dismissals, and it says fighters often cite it to gain leverage. I already said that. It said so many high profile cases like Golden Boy versus Heyman or Top Rank versus Heyman were settled out of court or dismissed, meaning no court explicitly enforced the law. Even cases that proceeded in court rarely resulted in a judgment directly applying the Ali Act. Again, effectively, it's a negotiation tool, right? So, bottom line, yes, the Ali Act exists as law. No, it has not truly been enforced in court in the sense of a fighter winning a judgment purely under it. Its main impact is deterrence and leverage, not direct legal remedies. So, again, you know, again, we're fighting so hard for something, right? We're fighting so hard for something that has never been enforced. Okay? It's never been enforced. Never. There's never been a legal judgment. Is that Chat GBT? Yeah, some of it is, but they're using sources like ESPN. They're using real sources from Google that you would normally get. So I guess the new thing now is when something's GBT, all of a sudden it's no longer relevant. But Chat GBT uses sources on the internet, uses Google, uses actual legislation that's been posted. You can actually take legal cases from the internet and source them. So again, it is some of it is Chat GBT, not all of it. But again, Chat GBT uses the same sources that just about most anyone else uses, right? But if you're going to refute what I said, all you have to do is cite me a case. So are you saying what I'm saying right now is your point? What I'm saying right now is not accurate. If it's not, then you're going to have to produce evidence otherwise, because it's quite clear that when the Ali Act has been cited, there's never been a court judgment on behalf of it ever. If you can find it, which I believe, which I'm almost 99.9% sure you won't be able to, if you can find a case where it's been enforced, right, then please provide it, because no one has yet. So when you settle out of court, that's not a judgment. Okay? When a case is dismissed, it's not a judgment. So this is not me picking a bone with you, Alexander Wilson, but people tend to question things and sources when they don't want them to be true. And again, some of that was ChatGPT, but other portions of it, other portions of it, you can read the court cases. The court cases are open to the public, and you can see the result of the times when the Ali Act was cited by fighters, and the results ended in either mostly dismissals and settlements that were undisclosed. So it never really went to court, because a lot of times fighters don't always have the money and the resources or the time to sue somebody, because it still has to go to court, and it still takes time, resources. And you, you know, it just puts a lot of stress on somebody, particularly if they're a fighter wanting to continue their career. They don't want to be bogged down in court fighting something for a long period of time while they could be fighting. So this is not me attacking you, but I'm 99.9% sure, confident everything that I presented to you is 100% accurate because, again, no one has yet, and even Lou DiBella himself has agreed what everything I've just said because I've heard him and other promoters also say it. But now all of a sudden, because there's someone coming into the sport that they don't like, now they want to cite it as being effective when before it never was, right? So again, let's take a look here, right, at Muhammad Ali's wife and what she says about the amendments. And she's actually uh, the executor of his estate. She's in charge of his estate and how his name is used and how his any likeness of him. And she was talked to by the people over at TKO in regards to the amendments that they were looking forward to put through legislation, what they've proposed. And here's what she had to say about the amendment. Okay, Muhammad Ali's widow, right, Lonnie Ali, has publicly endorsed the proposed amendments to the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act, known as the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. She views the legislation as a modernization of the sport, aiming to provide greater opportunities and protections for boxers. In a statement, she expressed that if Muhammad Ali were alive today, he would support efforts to ensure the sport remains strong and viable for future generations of athletes. And here's the source right here, which is ESPN.com. So I don't know, Alexander Wilson, if you trust ESPN.com or if you don't think they're a reliable source, but I trust ESPN.com. And there were other sources as well that have also cited that. So if Muhammad Ali's wife, now widow, who's in charge of his estate and how his name is being used, if she is endorsing it, then I think that holds a lot more weight than a bunch of guys on Twitter crying and complaining about an act that has never, ever been enforced. Right? And I talked about this before, but we'll talk about it briefly again. What are the amendments? So, one of the pieces of legislation in the act itself was that promoters cannot issue title belts or have title belts from their company that they give to the fighters, right? Because they felt as though it was a conflict of interest, meaning that a fighter would be forced into signing a long term contract with the promoter because he felt that in order to get the title, he would have to sign a long term contract, right? So that was something that they wanted to amend because they wanted to create what's called UBOs, which is the Unified Boxing Organization. So part back then when in 1999 when it was first created and when it was first proposed, when it was first passed through law in 2000, that was one thing in the act that they did not feel that it was right for promoters to be able to issue title belts because it would give the promoter leverage and force the fighter into signing long-term contracts in order to have to fight for that belt, right? So that's the one change. That's the one change. Everything else is staying the same, and they're actually adding a minimum pay per round, and they're actually adding minimum insurance, They're also adding training. There's going to provide training facilities. I think I heard that as well. I was reading that they're that promoters were required to help with the training facilities and providing training for the fighters. That was something else I read. But the main thing about this act, and one of the main reasons why it was created, was because of the conflict of interest with a fighter having the same person as a promoter slash manager slash advisor, right? Let me just read this super chat real quick. Alexander Wilson with the $5 super chat. Austin Trout took legal action against the WBO, citing the Ali Act, but was unsuccessful. You're right. It's never. There's either been settlements or the cases have been dismissed, right? And even with the UFC, that's a blemish. They settled out of court, so there wasn't a judgment issued against the UFC. Now that's a blemish on them. They were wrong and they had to pay the fighters. But as I said, moving forward, because the UFC is now owned by TKO, which is a publicly traded company, right? They have to answer the shareholders, right? They have board members now that they have to answer to. So there's a group of people now that make that former UFC fighter Brandon. Yeah, the UFC does not have the Muhammad Ali Act. That doesn't fall under the UFC. Actually, so it's never it's never been enforced. Yeah, the UFC that doesn't have to follow the Muhammad Ali Act. So again, the UFC had settled out of court. So it's not a judgment issue against the UFC. So again, it's never been enforced, right? There's never been any legal enforcement in a court of law for or against a promoter or fighter. It just hasn't happened. So people are fighting for something that's never really been used. So again, this is more of a tribal thing. So yeah, the main reason why in the beginning was because Don King back in the day, right? That's no problem, Dave. Like I said, I'm here to educate, man. And if I'm wrong, you know me. You've known me for years. If I'm wrong, I retract statements, I correct statements. But I've researched this heavily. I really have over the years. And when PBC first came out, right? When PBC first came out, I was one of the biggest supporters. But then over the years, I just saw what was going on, and I think nobody has done more harm to the boxing fan than PBC, particularly Al Heyman. I'm going to go into that later. So yeah, in the beginning, the biggest issue with the Muhammad Ali Act wasn't about promoters being able to issue title belts to champions. That wasn't the big thing. The biggest thing is what Al Heyman's doing, right? Being a promoter slash advisor slash manager. And one of the main reasons why, and one of the main catalysts in creating the Muhammad Ali Act was Don King and his son Carl King, because Don King was a promoter, his son Carl King was the manager, and Don King would promote the fighter, and Carl King would manage the fighter. And what is the manager's job? The manager's job is to get the most money possible for the fighter. That's the manager's job, right? And what is the promoter's job? It's to make the most profitable show possible. So yeah, it's great if he could make money for the fighter, but first and foremost, he's trying to put forth the biggest show possible, right? Regardless of what the fighters are making. You know what I mean? Because promoters getting the rights deal from the broadcaster, promoters getting a portion of the live gate, and the percentage of that on what he wants to give to the fighter, that's negotiable, right? So the promoter's job, where a promoter may want to do right by the fighter, first and foremost, the promoter's job is to put on the most profitable show for the company, to turn a profit for the company. And the manager's job is to turn a profit for the fighter, right? So if you got Don King being the promoter and you got Carl King being the manager, both working for the same company, which was Don King Productions, right? Both those guys are working in tandem against the fighter, which is pretty much what Al Heyman is doing now. So, no disrespect to Sean Zattel or anyone else, but next time you're at a PBC show, why don't you ask Tom Brown, why isn't Al Heyman here promoting this show instead of you? That will take courage, right? That will take courage doing something like that. But no one's going to do that because a lot of people are tribal and they're on that side of the street. So no one's gonna ask Tom Brown, hey, where's Al Heyman? Why isn't he here? Why is he hiding? Why is he the president of the company, Heyman Boxing, LLC, but you're here? So Al Heyman doesn't have a promotional license, doesn't have a promoter's license. He once did have a managerial license, right? Back in the day in Vegas, I believe. No, I think it was I think it was California. No, I apologize. I think it was either California or Vegas. But he did have a promotional, a managerial license once back in the day. I don't think he still has the managerial license, but right now he calls himself an advisor. But he's also the owner and president of Heyman Boxing LLC. So as the advisor, he quote unquote advises the fighter on what's the best move to make. But since he owns the company, Heyman Boxing, is he going to advise the fighter on what's best for the fighter? Or is he going to advise the fighter on doing what's best for his company, ensuring that he makes the most profit for his company? And that's why you see when these guys sign promotional contracts, the promoter has to provide them with fights. More often than not, they sign 2-3 fight deals. A lot of times they'll sign fight minimum, right? With these promoters, I know Shakur had a fight minimum, Terrence Crawford had a fight minimum, but with the PBC, none of these guys had long-term contracts, right? Most of them were all fight to fight, and on occasion, they would sign they would sign a 2-fight deal with Canelo every now and then, and even with Floyd was never technically a PBC fighter. He signed his deal with Showtime directly, right? Now, when Floyd was with HBO, right, he had that contract with PBC. But even then, I don't. He always had that promotional company. So I don't believe he ever called. He would come out and say, "I'm not a PBC fighter." I guess he was partners with Al Heyman, and then from what I hear, he has financial interest in PBC, right? I think Sean can move on with time. He's talking about boxing having the biggest gates that happened 10 years ago. Again, he asked a question about the California State Athletic Commission, who initially endorsed the amendments to the Ali Act, but now they're rescinding their endorsement, and they're going to have a meeting to talk about all of a sudden concerns they have about it. And most of this is because of the public pressure. They didn't care about it before, but now they're hearing public backlash from some of the members of the media. But here's what I can help you out, Sean, because Sean asked what happens if they don't endorse it, right? It doesn't matter if the amendments get passed through Congress. If this is federal legislation, Sean. States can't do anything to stop it, right? Now, a commission can add their own layer of protection, rules and regulations to how they want to operate within their state, but they cannot take away or just say we're not going to follow, we're not going to adhere to or recognize the Muhammad Ali Act once it's passed into law. by Congress. This is what it's federal legislation. Basic civics. Learn this in basic civics class, middle school, right? Federal law supersedes state law. So you didn't really have to ask Dana that question. You could have asked your civics teacher that. She would have told you that it's federal legislation supersedes state legislation. It's that simple. So it doesn't matter. Alexander Wilson says, I think Sean can move on with time. He's talking about, okay, I think we already read this. I'm sorry. Yeah, so again, the big thing that was a problem was the promoter having too much leverage over the fighter, not because of title belts, because the sanctioning bodies were always in place. That was never something that was really in question. That wasn't going on. Promoters weren't creating. I know they were talking about PBC possibly creating their own belt back in the day, but that didn't happen. Didn't look like that was really ever going to happen. But the big thing is Al Heyman is probably the biggest offender of the Muhammad Ali Act right now. Because again, he acts as the promoter, the advisor, and the manager. Right? So he's basically doing what Carl King and Don King were doing. Right? But no one cares because no one is going to ask Tom Brown at the next PBC show. And if Tom Brown is part of the promotion with Jake Paul versus Javante Davis, if he shows up, ask him, where's Al Heyman? Why is he the owner of this company, PBC, which has the logo all over the ring? Why is he the advisor of the fighter, but he's also the promoter? He's the person who's negotiating the rights fee deals with the broadcasters, and at the same time, he's advising and managing the fighters, but nobody cares. And here's the thing too. What TKO is doing is, yeah, they're gonna have their own league. Okay. But that doesn't mean they could manage the fighter, right? That doesn't mean they're gonna advise the fighter. They're not gonna have all those same roles that Al Heyman has. And another thing too is they're concerned about, well, a promoter should not be able to rank fighters. Well, in the UFC, the UFC doesn't rank fighters. The journalists rank the fighters. They have a board of journalists that rank the fighters, and that's how the fighters are ranked in the UFC. Right? This is going to be like the PFL, which is a league. In the league, they have like tournaments. This is going to be more or less like in the WWE, they have that Tough Enough series, right? Or they have the Ultimate Fighter in the UFC. And I understand the argument, yeah, how these guys aren't named fighters, but everybody is a nobody until they become a somebody. So I understand people questioning how successful this is going to be, right? Because these guys are going to be mid to lower level guys. But could there be that diamond in the rough that does graduate, and once they fulfill and have done everything they could do in this TKO boxing league or whatever you want to call it, and then the fighter does get passed off to Turkey Al Sheikh to be put in the bigger fights? See, everyone, the way this is being framed, like, oh, well, they're going to do away with, no, they're not going to do away with the sanctioning bodies. They never said that. That's just bullshit. It's just like how in boxing you have Misfits Boxing, you have BKFC, you have BKB. This is just another faction of a form of boxing. It's another area of combat sports. So this is an addition. It's not a subtraction. It's not subtracting from one thing to add to another thing. They're going to exist over here, and the sanctioning bodies are going to go about their business over here as usual. So the way this is being framed is just wrong. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like Dana White. You can say whatever you want, but just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. And Let me just read this super chat again. Thank you so much, Alexander Wilson. You're really giving me a lot of super chats today. I really appreciate it. I was confused about the California part. They have no effect on what Congress passes. What was the point of bringing that up? Was it a mislead? Again, I like Sean. I don't want to insult or denigrate him in any way, but the way he kept asking the same question over and over again, I just thought it was it wasn't. I mean, listen, I'm a First Amendment guy too. If he legitimately had a question about that, but the way he framed it was as if the California State Athletic Commission did have some type of authority on whether or not this law would get passed or not, or whether or not it could be applied in their state. Well, again, it's federal legislation, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say maybe he didn't know, maybe he didn't do the proper research. But if you take a basic, if you we all had civics in class, I would assume in middle school, we all had it. Federal law supersedes state law. So just the simple fact that somebody doesn't endorse something means nothing. There's many pieces of legislation that certain congressmen, certain mayors, certain governors, certain state senators, certain US senators don't endorse. Does that necessarily mean the legislation is not going to get passed? So that's the thing. And is the California State Athletic Commission is a big commission, but is it bigger than the Nevada State Athletic Commission? The biggest fights in the history of the sport, where are they held? In Las Vegas, right? No disrespect to California, but where is Dana White based? In Las Vegas, right? So again, I just want people to know the truth. I want people to be good faith actors. I want people to, when they say something, don't just say things for gotcha moments. Don't just say things to score points. Tell the truth. You don't have to like Dana White. Yeah, he settled out of court in a huge class action lawsuit. Those fighters had issues, rightfully so, as it seems. I'm not here to defend the UFC in that regard. All I'm saying is that was a time when the Fertitta brothers were running the UFC, and the Fertitta brothers were in control of the purse strings, right? Dana White, I'm not saying he doesn't have any influence on what goes on. Obviously, he's a major player. He's the current CEO. He was the face. He was the figurehead. But he was never really the money guy, and he's still not really the money guy. He's more of a guy who's in charge of the strategic direction globally of the UFC. He's an operational guy. He talks about the show, where it should be, how it should be presented. Talked about how he didn't like how in boxing the show drags on. He's an operational guy. Does he have financial say? I'm sure he does, but that's not really his thing. And even now, you have Hunter Campbell, right? He's the chief business officer of the UFC. Even now, that's the man that does the contracts with the fighters, not Dana. And again, as I said, this is not the same UFC that it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. This is a publicly traded company that is required, it's required by their shareholders and by the board of directors and by the investors. They have no choice to be transparent. What happened back then with the Zuffa could never happen today because that was when they were not publicly traded. And do you think, after all the negative publicity they have received from that settlement, right? And you go back to those ESPN shows where I think it was Lorenzo Fertitta was being interviewed and he was being grilled, and it was a bad look. Listen, it's a bad look. I'm not here to defend it. It's a bad look. But I'm here just to tell the truth. I'm here to tell the truth. They are not taking away the protections of the fighters with these amendments. They're changing one thing and they're adding a couple other things, right? The one thing they're adding is the TKO as an organization can have their own title belt or whatever they want. And it's just like in boxing. Like when boxing has their own tournaments and they award the Muhammad Ali trophy for the tournament, when they had the bantamweight tournament, when they had the cruiserweight tournament, it's the same thing. The WBC has the Grand Prix tournament. And isn't it better that a fighter can fight and not have to pay a sanctioning fee? Like, here's another thing. Why doesn't anyone ask Mauricio Suleiman, why are you taking a 3% sanctioning fee for these interim belts, right? For these championship and recesses, for these eliminator bouts? Why do these fighters have to pay this 3% sanctioning fee? And where does that money go? Because way back when you had the New York State Athletic Commission as an organization, when you could be the New York State Athletic Commission champion, or you could be the National Boxing Association champion, which was called the NBA, which in 1962 became the WBA. Right around 1961, 62, which that's when fighters had to start paying sanctioning fees. Before that, the promoters used to pay the sanctioning fees. So again, you want to criticize the sport of boxing. There's enough blame to go around. Boxing has enough issues itself. They don't have the moral high ground to really criticize anybody else. Bob Arum was sued for bribing the IBF. Bob Lee went to jail because he took bribes from Bob Arum to get fighters ranked. And we already know what Al Heyman has done and is continuously doing right now. And people want to blame Floyd Mayweather for the current state of boxing. Who created Floyd Mayweather? Who really was behind creating Money Mayweather? It was Al Heyman. Al Heyman, in my opinion, is probably no one in the modern era has done more damage to the sport of boxing than Al Heyman. You guys are worried about Dana White. But you won't ask Tom Brown, where is Al Heyman? Who's funding this show? Is it you? How is this money getting funneled down to the fighters? How are the rights fees from Amazon getting funneled through? Who's paying you, Tom Brown? Right? And for all intents and purposes, right? Dana White could do the same thing Al Heyman's doing. He could hire a promoter to promote these shows if he wanted to, right? And he could just say, well, we're going to be like the PFL. We're going to be a league. I'm just going to be the owner of the league. I'm not going to be the promoter. I'll let someone else be the promoter. And I'll just be the president of this boxing organization. Just like Al Heyman's doing. He could do the same thing if he wanted to, but he's not. Why? Because he doesn't want to. He's coming into something and he doesn't want to create that cloud over his head. He's trying to eliminate the conflict of interest. So instead of just flat out, for all intents and purposes, ignoring the Muhammad Ali Act, like Al Heyman's doing. Now, Al Heyman, he gets by on a technicality because technically he doesn't have a promotional license. I don't believe he has a managerial license anymore. And even if he did, he could say, I'm just an advisor / man. I don't even think he has a, but he could just say, I'm an advisor. Right? I believe he did let his managerial license expire. But even still, he doesn't have a promotional license, right? So hey, Dana could do the same thing. He could say, oh, you know what? I'm not going to be the promoter of TKO. I'll just hire someone from the outside. Maybe I'll hire Tom Brown to work for me too. I'll hire Joe DeGuardia or something. I'll hire Lou DiBella. Lou DiBella could be my promoter for this. And I don't even have to make an amendment to the Muhammad Ali Act. But he doesn't want to do what Al Heyman's doing. He doesn't want to put out put out the deception. He doesn't want to put it out there that he's trying to be deceptive. He's trying to be transparent. So what is he doing? They're asking if that part of the Muhammad Act can be amended, which legislation is amended all the time. The Constitution is amended all the time, right? It's been amended all the time. So again, this is all about nothing. This is not really about the Ali Act, an act that has never ever been enforced. And think about it. Even if a fighter did want to sue a promoter, look at all the time, energy, and look at Andre Ward when he was suing his promoter. Look at all the time out of the ring that he missed. The Ali Act can't do anything about that because if you're in litigation with your promoter, guess what? You're not fighting. You're paying for lawyers. So again, what are you guys really arguing about? You're arguing about a law, a bill, a piece of legislation that has not once ever been enforced by a court of law. Ever. Ever. And then when Top Rank and Golden Boy sued Al Heyman, they went to a federal district court. You know what the federal district court did? They dismissed both cases. They laughed at it. They laughed at it. It was a joke. So again, what are we really arguing here for? It's much ado about nothing, honestly. It's much ado about nothing. All right, that's enough with that. Let's get to the fight, man. Big fight. A lot of people, not a lot, but a couple people told me after the weigh-in when Max Kellerman was interviewing Terrence Crawford. Eric texted me. He said he thought Crawford looked a little bit nervous. Some people on Twitter are saying Crawford looked nervous. I don't know. I thought he was laughing, kind of smiling. I did not. It did not seem like the moment was getting to Crawford. Some people are saying that. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I didn't see it. Alexander will say, Sean has been on a crusade that Turkey, TKO are destroying USA boxing, but the real question is why did HBO, ESPN, and Showtime get rid of boxing? Again, I like Sean. I do. But Sean, look at what Al Heyman did, right? He incentivized fighters to fight guys who weren't the best fighters, right? So he incentivized guys for to not have to fight the best, paid them a substantial amount of money, right? And because he has to pay them a substantial amount of money, just so those guys can get those huge purses for fighting fights that normally they wouldn't get paid that amount to fight, that's why all the fights are on pay-per-view. So why am I going to advocate for fighters who tell me as a consumer, as a fan, that I don't care what you want as a fan. I don't care who you want me to fight. Then you literally have a guy, Floyd Mayweather, put a ski mask on telling his fans, I am robbing you. I am robbing you. So why should I care about fighter pay when these guys are not giving me value for my dollar? I am more concerned as a consumer getting value for my dollar. I don't go into a restaurant and say to the owner of the restaurant, the manager of the restaurant, hey man, how much are you paying the cooks? How much are you paying the waiters? My job as a consumer is to go in there and pay for the best service and get the best food possible. That's what I care about. And that's how I approach everything as a consumer, right? Now, I understand the fighters wanting to get the most they can get. If I was a fighter, I would do the same thing, right? But as a consumer, I am not going to advocate for a fighter to get paid more when they turn around and tell me, I don't give a fuck about you. I'll fight whoever I want, whether it's the best or not. Doesn't matter to me. Alicia Bumgardner said, Tank and Jake don't care about y'all. They're getting the bag. Why am I going to advocate and support people like that who are basically giving me the middle finger, who are putting on ski masks and they're openly mocking me, telling me I'm robbing the bank? And I'm supposed to advocate for those people. Why? Why? That would be like going into McDonald's, buying a Big Mac, and paying the same amount of money that I would as if I was buying a prime rib or a filet mignon. By putting 80% of your shows on pay-per-view for fights that normally would never be pay-per-view, and you're charging me $80 for a fight that I used to get for free, and I'm supposed to advocate for the fighter after that? Think about it. The more the fighter gets, the more my pay-per-view costs, the more my subscription fee costs to the broadcast platform. So why am I going to advocate for somebody else while hurting myself financially? In what world? Think about what they're asking you to do. And then Paulie Malignaggi is telling me that UFC fans are the dumbest fans in the world. Are they really, Paulie? Are they really the dumbest fans in the world? They never really talk about, like, you have Ariel Helwani and Luke Thomas, two journalists. They want to do the virtue signal when it comes to fighter pay, but most UFC fans just care about getting the best fights possible. They don't go back and forth and argue about how much fighters are making. They don't give a shit. They act as consumers should act. They want to get the most value for their dollar. And that's what a fan is supposed to do. That's what a consumer does in a capitalist economy. That's my role in all of this. That's your role in all of this. Your role is not a manager. Your role is not an advisor. Your role is not a lawyer. PBC is not publicly traded on the stock market. Top Rank is not publicly traded on the stock market. Matchroom is not publicly traded on the stock market. So why do I care? You know who is publicly traded on the stock market? TKO. You could argue Amazon is publicly traded on the stock market, but boxing to Amazon is basically filler content. Where do they make a lot of their money when it comes to sports broadcasting? The NFL. They're killing it with the NFL. Boxing is just filler content. Why do you think all the fights on Amazon are pay-per-view? They're not investing a lot of money, right? Paramount Plus, $7.7 billion. Why? Are they idiots? Are they dumb? TKO. They're going to be getting a deal on Paramount Plus, from what I've heard. Turki Al-Sheikh, from what I heard, is investing $11 million in TKO. I don't know how much Paramount Plus is getting. So they're going to have some money behind them, right? Oh, why you care about the money, Beep? Because that means they're going to invest in the product. And they're going to give me decent quality. I'm going to be getting a steady flow of fights, most likely. Listen, it could still flop. But again, what are you guys afraid of? What are you afraid of? They're going to be over here. You'll be over there. You don't like them. You ignore them. Sean, you don't have to go to the fights. You don't have to cover the fights over there. You don't have to apply to get credentialed over there. So you ask Dana White a question: what's going to happen if the California State Athletic Commission doesn't endorse the amendments to the Muhammad Act? Doesn't matter, Sean. It's federal legislation. If it gets passed by Congress, it goes through with or without the endorsement. I'll answer the question for you. Okay? I'll answer the question for you. It's that simple. It's that simple. Yeah. So let's get back to the fight here because keep going back to that. And I want to talk about the fight. Um, yeah. So that's what people are saying right now. I thought both guys looked wonderful on the scales. Both guys look really good. The one difference you could see, is, people are trying to say Crawford's bigger or they're the same size. I think upper body wise they're very similar in size, but the difference is when you look at kind of those legs and his hips. He's a bigger guy. But as I said, I just don't think the size advantage is as great as it's being presented, or even when you say a guy who's 154 pounds moving up to 168. I don't think you're going to see a 14-pound weight advantage in the ring on the night. I'm guessing there'll be about 5 or 6 pounds difference, maybe even less than that. All the questions that are being asked, yeah, could Crawford handle the weight? What about the layoff? Can he handle the punching power? All this stuff. Can he hurt Canelo? I broke the fight down over and over again. I don't want to keep repeating myself and sound redundant. Now it's up to the fighters to either do it or not do it. But I will say one thing. I was listening to an interview that Canelo had with Gabe Rosado, and something Canelo said about that Williams Skull fight was very telling to me. He was talking about, yeah, how he went over to Saudi and the time change definitely affected him, which is legitimate. I mean, William Skull, I'm sure he had to deal with the time change too. But if Canelo, I'll take Canelo at his word. The time change may have affected him, and he said he was a little tired because of the time change. He was a little sluggish, and he was told by Eddie Reynoso, because he was a little bit tired, don't go chase him, because if you go chase him and he lands 1 or 2 punches on you, right, he could steal the rounds from you and maybe steal a decision from you. So he said to Gabe Rosado, because Gabe Rosado said, yeah, this guy was moving a lot. It looked like you were just saying to yourself, I'm not gonna chase this guy around the ring. But Canelo said something very, very telling to me. Now, is that just something that he said and that was exclusive to that situation? Or as I said before, and Paulie Malignaggi said in a less eloquent way than me, is he at a point now where he's really pacing himself because he doesn't want to run out of gas? He always did pace himself. He never was the volume guy. He always did, in many cases, fade late down the stretch. So if that is a problem here, if he goes back to reverts back to that one punch, if he continues to and reverts back to that one punch at a time in this fight, is one punch going to be enough? And can there be one punch that turns the fight and really hurts Crawford, where he can not have to exert a lot of energy in this fight? Because that's the big question. That's going to be the big question, right? So these are all legitimate questions that will finally be answered. We can continue to ask them over and over and over again, but I just wanted to talk about the weigh-in. We talked about it yesterday, Eric and I. Kind of wanted to elaborate further on it because I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter talk about it, a lot of people on YouTube talk about it, giving opinions. Nobody's saying that either fighter didn't look great, but there are some people saying Crawford kind of looked like he was a little nervous under the lights in front of all those people. It kind of hit him. I honestly, I didn't get that sense, but maybe I'm wrong. People are disagreeing with me. I thought Crawford looked like he was calm, relaxed. He was laughing. And then when he walked off the stage, he looked out to the crowd that was booing him, and he went like that. So I don't know. I thought he looked fine. Canelo looked great in terms of how his mood was. Both guys looked looked nice, relaxed, calm. Um, it's funny, like Crawford not having to cut as much. Is he even in a better mood because of that? Is he more relaxed because of that? Because he looks really relaxed and laid back. And Canelo, he never seems nervous or irritable to me because I don't believe he's cutting a lot either to make 168. I don't think he's cutting as much as some of these other guys are cutting to make their weights. So I think both guys, more than likely, in my opinion, didn't have really bad weight cuts. So that's that. So the I guess the biggest questions here, we'll go over them one more time, is will Crawford be able to hold that extra weight without getting tired and without being slower? And will Canelo still be throwing that one punch at a time? Has his legs slowed down? And will that show up even more in this fight? Or was it just basically like he said, I'm fighting bigger guys. I don't have to chase these guys because they're slower than me. I can win rounds by not doing a lot. But he did say he can't do that in this fight. So another one of my big questions is, and I talked to Chris Conner about this yesterday on his podcast. I said, Chris, he's been fighting at this way and at this pace for the last six fights. Now all of a sudden he says he's going to switch it up and do something different because it's Crawford. Will the body respond? And I told Eric the same thing yesterday. When he hits that gas pedal, will that car jump quickly off the line, or will it kind of putter off the blocks? Will he be stuck in first gear trying to shift into second gear? These are all great questions, really great questions. So, all right, guys, that's all I got. I think we pretty much talked about everything we could talk about. Make sure you check us out tomorrow on the Ringside Reporter podcast, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I may consider maybe going live after the fight, but I can't guarantee it because after these fights, because it's so late, I'm so tired. My biological clock, I get up sometimes at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning when because I go to work at 6 and I like to go to the gym before I go to work pretty much every day, almost every day. So yeah, my biological clock, I'm gonna be really struggling to even stay up for the main event. So I would love to be able to have enough energy to probably do a post fight show tonight because I have a feeling this is going to be a real good, interesting fight tonight. And I haven't been, I'm going to say something probably really blasphemous and hyperbolic. I'm more excited for this fight than I was for Pacquiao Mayweather. They've done such a great job promoting this fight, man. Uh, I mean, I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. All right, Beeb is out. Talk to y'all soon. Have a great night and enjoy the fights because I know I will.